Last week, I made a tutorial about trippy leads, and someone asked me about the bass line in that example. So today I'm going to be covering how to make square bass for Psytrance. What I've got is a MIDI pattern that is just 3 offbeats, except one of them is an octave higher. I'm using the note of C here, and then every 4th beat I have a glide, and I alternate between 2 different glides. So if I open up the patch, you will see that it is not a traditional looking square wave. The way that I've got this waveform is by doing the phase dispersion tactics that I usually do on saw waves, and that is very common in Psytrance bass processing, except I've done it on a square wave. If I take a square wave and put it on a low C note, then if I grab M freeform phase, which is a free plugin from Melda Production. This is a very powerful tool when it comes to making phase dispersed waveforms. So if I take a oscilloscope to show you what's going on, here we have just a usual square wave. Then if I drag this point down and this point up, this graph represents the frequency spectrum. The low frequencies are down here and the high frequencies are up here. And so all I'm doing here is making it so the phases are pushed forwards for the high frequencies and back for the low frequencies. And that means that the high frequencies will hit first and then the low frequencies will follow. And the more you increase this depth knob, the greater the effect will be. Obviously, having a lot is much too destructive. You only really want a small amount. What I would do is I would just find a sweet spot, perhaps somewhere about here. Then I would just export that. Then I could use that as a waveform in a bass patch. So that's what I've done. And then you could go ahead and set up your bassline patch. And what I've got here is a main volume envelope set to an 1/8. And that is attached to the main oscillator, which has no sub bass in it. And is also attached to the stereo layer, which has much less low frequencies on it. I've just manually gone in here and just rolled off the lowest harmonics. So we've just got some more upper frequencies here. If I play you without the stereo layer, and then with, it's just slightly richer. Then I've got the filter pluck attached onto a 24 decibels per octave low pass filter. Then cut off range and position is going to change the feel of this bass. And then of course the shape itself is going to massively influence the way this sounds. So that is just a matter of personal taste. And then the third envelope here is just attached onto the sub bass. The balance of how much sub bass you have also affects the feel of the bass line. And the sub bass volume is slightly delayed, which helps reinforce that phase dispersed characteristic. And then in the effects, the only thing I have is a utility, which is just making sure that the volume cuts off using this gain slider. You will have seen a very similar process used in my video that I did about rolling bass, which I'll link in the description if you want to go check that out. What's happening as well, I just drew in this shape and dragged it into oscillator C, which is fully turned down because it's just being used as a modulator on the panning of our stereo layer. So if I go into the matrix, you can see that the B panning is controlled by oscillator C. It's going both ways, and this slider will determine how much panning is being applied. You don't need too much, but if you have a bit, then it helps the whole sound gel with the rest of the elements in the track. That is pretty much it, except for the fact that I've got the random phase on all of these oscillators set to 0, and I've got a small macro that is attached to the phase position of both of my oscillators here with a small modulation range, which allows me to move the macro and fine tune the transient. And so you could really dial in the punch with that. And then all I've done for the glide basses is I've cloned the patch and just changed the envelopes. So here we have the main volume envelope, which is down for when the kick is in, then up for the second half. And then I've got this second envelope, which is opening up the cutoff. Then I've got this third envelope, which is on the sub, which is just a slight variation of this first envelope for our main sound. And then I've got LFO6, which is attached onto the pitch, which, as you can see here in the matrix, is attached onto the main tuning. And I've got that set to an octave. And then changing this pitch curve changes the glide sound. And then all I've done is just duplicated it a second time and made a slight variation. As you can see, it's pretty much the same setup, except with a different pitch envelope. So that is going to conclude this video. Hopefully you got a bit of insight into square bass lines. And with all that being said, I'll see you on the next video.